A very good afternoon to all of you. Welcome back. I'm Ankita from NASSCOM Product Council, back with another interesting episode of the Product Management series. Today I have with me Venkatesh Iyer, Associate Director Products in redBus. He will share his knowledge on a very relevant topic, which is how to build marketplace products. I'm sure it will be a fantastic webinar. Just two more points before I hand over to you, Venkatesh. Wear your curiosity hat and ask questions. Venkatesh will answer most of them at the end and might take a few even during the middle of the presentation. Do not forget to leave your feedback at the end. It will help me make the future sessions better and more meaningful. Over to you, Venkatesh.
Thanks, Ankita, for this introduction. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. We'll be talking about how to build marketplace products today, and the reason why I want to share this topic and some of my learnings with you on this topic is because most of these successful e-commerce stories or consumer internet success stories that we've seen, quite a lot of them are actually marketplace products, and there are certain unique features about marketplaces that either make or break them. And that's the reason why I thought that this topic is very relevant, and I hope that you guys find relevance and knowledge through this. And I also hope that aspiring product managers or even product managers managing marketplaces will hopefully find actionable insights from this discussion. So very quickly about me, as Ankita introduced, I'm Venki, engineer turned product manager, and have had basically two stints at product management. I started off as in the B2B SaaS space, was there for a couple of years before moving into consumer internet space, and largely throughout my career in consumer internet and in redBus, I've seen marketplaces grow at various sizes, and also seen how a huge marketplace like redBus India actually has properties that are very unique to it. So that's a little bit about me. Just wanted to bounce you off very quickly the agenda for today. We'll start off by defining what a marketplace is, and we'll start off with a very simple definition and go through a few examples of that. Spend an inordinate amount of time talking about what is different about these marketplaces and how this difference should play a role in any product roadmap for any marketplace product manager. We touch upon the building blocks of a marketplace and what are sort of the large product focus areas at different stages of scale of a marketplace. So we'll start off with what's relevant for startups. We'll start off with what is relevant for medium sized marketplaces that are beyond the startup stage and are looking to really accelerate growth. And you also touch upon all right, so let's get started. Let's define what a marketplace is, right? So before we get into that, broadly, I think as a product manager or as business models, there are four kinds of business models and hence four kinds of product management tracks, if I may say. The first is for physical product managers, where product managers actually ship physical products, and this could vary from manufacturers of cars to manufacturers of cell phones to even enterprise servers, laptop computers, etc. And there also product management is very relevant and it has a different flavor to it. Then comes software and SaaS creators, the likes of Microsoft, Adobe, AWS, Salesforce, so many of them, which has a slightly different flavor to it. And then comes, service creators, which is mostly about consulting and IT companies. They have product suites to sort of dovetail into their service offerings and really add value to their customers, right? And then in the end, we have networks and marketplaces, and actually also platforms. So, right, three very different kinds of products, all of which have something in common, but a lot different as well. So the likes of Facebook, Amazon, Uber, even Google Play, and many, many more are actually networks and marketplaces. They also have elements of product management in them. While the fundamental principles of product management stays the same across all of these, there are certain very, very unique features to marketplaces that play a huge role in how a product manager can actually add value and grow a marketplace from zero to achieving exponential growth. All right, so take a moment to look at this picture of a very, very traditional, conventional, old school marketplace, very offline. You'll see that there's a big hall, and there are sellers trying to sell vegetables, and buyers coming and making a choice and completing a transaction, right? So clearly we see two sides that are interested in completing a transaction and finishing what they are looking for. And then there is somebody who's operating this hall and is basically facilitating a transaction, not doing a transaction himself or herself, but actually facilitating a transaction. So you see the role of this person owning this hall is to facilitate a transaction by providing space, providing electricity, possibly even providing some marketing services, and also maybe parking spaces, right? So at its core, this is what a marketplace is. Anybody, any platform, anybody who tries to match demand and supply and facilitate a transaction can be and should be termed as a marketplace, right? So very, very obvious here. And so these marketplaces have existed for hundreds of thousands of years. It is only very recently we've started to see the online versions of these gaining a lot of traction. So like we saw before, it's really a platform that is matching buyers and sellers. Sellers come with a certain need, buyers come with a certain hope of liquidating their inventory, and a platform must do an awesome job of matching demand and supply and facilitating a frictionless transaction. So that's really what an online marketplace is. And some of these examples that you see on your right hand side are examples of successful marketplaces, successful companies, where you will find huge product teams focusing on driving scale, focusing on driving efficiencies, focusing on driving growth, and facilitating transactions, right? So Amazon, Flipkart, Myntra, redBus, Make My Trip, Uber, some of these are very obvious examples that come to our mind. But then there are a few less obvious ones also over here. And specifically, if you look at Google AdWords and Google Play, also in some flavor is a marketplace. And as we progress through this discussion, we will realize how and why they are marketplaces, and how and why they are slightly different from the likes of an Amazon or a Flipkart or a Myntra. So the one key distinction that I want to bring about at this stage is that a marketplace need not always have only two sides. Most conventional marketplaces end up having only two sides, but there are three-sided marketplaces as well, which is the reason why I've put Swiggy here as an example, where there is a person who wishes to order a food. There is a restaurant who wishes to fulfill that order, and then there is a delivery agent who must orchestrate this order and make the delivery possible. So there are really three aspects to this marketplace, and typically these marketplaces tend to be slightly more complicated as far as their core functionality of matching is concerned. Similarly, Uber is a slightly different example of a marketplace, which we commonly refer to as an on-demand marketplace, right? So the key difference, I think, between an Uber and, let's say, a redBus is that Uber gets to not only match demand and supply, but also control the price to some extent. Not all marketplaces get the opportunity, or not all of them are in a space where they get the opportunity to do that, right? So those are some of the examples. Now, quickly, let us touch upon the likes of Google AdWords and Google Play, right? So for those of you who know how AdWords work, right, there's basically a set of people searching on Google, and they search using a few search keywords and search terms, and then there are a sort of set of brands and advertisers who want to bid on those keywords, right? So there is demand at one end, and then there is supply, so demand at the advertiser, and supply in terms of search queries on the other end. And all Google AdWords does is it allows for a very, very real-time, highly dynamic bidding engine that actually matches supply with demand. So it is, in a sense, a very different kind of marketplace where immediacy is at its heart, right? So that is the reason why product management here and the dynamics with Google AdWords is very, very different from what you will find in the likes of a Swiggy or a Make My Trip or even an Uber. Similarly, if you see Google Play, right? Google Play also at its heart is a marketplace in the sense that there are developers who want to build apps and to list on Google Play, and then on the other end, there are users of Android who want to install these apps and derive value out of them. So essentially, Google Play is a sort of a curated platform, so to speak, that connects developers with users. And these kind of marketplaces and these kind of platforms also tend to have slightly different flavors when it comes to growing them and scaling them and managing them. Finally, the last example here that I'd like to touch upon is that of OLX, right? OLX is a slightly different flavor of marketplace in the sense that at its heart, it is also matching demand and supply. But here, the set of buyers and sellers can actually be the same. There's a lot of commonality and overlap between buyers and sellers. And in the modern day terminology, we call these as C2C or customers to customer marketplaces, compared to an Amazon or a redBus, which essentially is termed as a B2C or a business to customer marketplaces. Right. So I hope that you have seen enough examples to really appreciate what a marketplace at its core is. I now want to touch upon the key difference between networks and marketplaces, right? So in the first slide, we saw that networks and marketplaces had clubbed them in one of the four categories of companies and business models. But there is actually a unique distinction between networks and marketplaces. Let me take the example of Facebook here. Now, Facebook is a classic example of a network, which has eventually morphed into a marketplace now, but at its heart, it still remains to be a network. Whereas an Airbnb is a classic example of a marketplace, right? So the key difference between networks and marketplaces is the dynamics behind making them successful is very different. For example, a network will always talk about interconnections. Anybody who you talk to in Facebook will always talk about interactions, engagement, critical mass, clustering, interconnections, etc. Whereas these ideas and concepts and metrics, although are relevant to marketplaces, but they are not the drivers of the existence of a marketplace, right? So what a marketplace product manager would essentially be talking about is how efficiently can I manage and match demand and supply? Am I ensuring liquidity in my marketplace? Who's my money side? Who's my subsidy side? And do I have exclusivity in my marketplace in the sense that do I sell products that are not available anywhere else, even offline, right? So there is a very fundamental difference between social networks and marketplaces, although both of them at their heart have some commonalities, but there are a lot of differences in how to scale these the two kinds of business models. Now, hopefully you guys have understood the core definition of a marketplace and have a clear mental model of what can and cannot be called a marketplace. Let us now jump into discussing what really is different about marketplaces and why did I mention that there are unique opportunities and challenges that you may not conventionally find in a SaaS kind of a product or any consumer internet product that is not a marketplace, right? So at its heart, there is something called network effects, which I truly believe every product manager, every marketplace product manager must understand really clearly in his or her mind, because network effects are really the key dynamic behind most successful marketplaces today. And unless you as a product manager and you as a team are working towards pushing and achieving these network effects, you are most likely not going to see exponential growth and exponential revenue in your marketplace. right? So let's now see what a network effect really means. And I am actually borrowing an example or a classic definition from Anderson Horowitz. They've done a really good job of all the definitions of network effects floating around the internet. I found this one to be the most relevant. So network effects occur when a product or service becomes more valuable to its users as more users use it, right? So the most classic definition of a network effect in the conventional sense is that of a telephone line, right? So imagine hypothetically for a moment that there's one telephone provider and there's only one user who has a telephone line. Now the value delivered to that user, now, although the user may have a very novel product, but the value delivered there is zero because the user cannot talk to anyone else. Now imagine that there is one more user who joins this network. Now suddenly there is value for both of these users in the sense that they're able to use this telephone line to talk to each other. Imagine now that there are 10 more users in this telephone line, and now suddenly you will see that the value for each of these 10 users has increased exponentially, right? So that is the key idea of a network effect, right? The more users as more users join a platform or join a marketplace or join a network, each user tends to extract or gain more value out of it, right? So that is in a sense what network effect means. And there are several online examples as well where clearly network effects are seen, right? For example, Facebook. Let's consider Facebook. Or let's consider WhatsApp, for example. Now imagine that you're the only user on WhatsApp, right? Although the product is great, it's very easy to use, it has a fantastic UI, it has superb emojis, it is damn fast, it is very small and technically very superior, but you have zero value in it because you can't use that to talk to anyone else or to post to anyone else or to engage with anyone else, right? So at its heart, while product managers have to make sure that great UI, usability, all of that is hygiene, but the causality for success really comes from network effects and not the fact that they have a beautiful UI, right? So great interfaces are not great marketplaces is something that all of us marketplace product managers have to very clearly understand. So I hope that that sort of explains what a network effect is. And I also wanted to sort of, whatever I spoke about, I wanted to show you a pictorial and a graphical representation of what I mean from a business standpoint. We spoke about the value that the user would extract as more and more users join the network. But let us now switch our hats and see how network effects help a business, right? So you will see here that the profit or the growth or the value growth is exponential, but the costs here grow only linearly. So if you look down upon this, you'll see that initially when there are two users, there is only so much value. But the moment you move from 2 users to 10 users, the value suddenly exponentially increases, right? But at the same time, so for example, with 2 users, the value is 2V, but with 10 users, the value is not 20V, it is 90V, right? So it is really exponential growth. But if you look at the costs here, F here indicates the fixed costs and C here indicates the incremental or marginal cost, as we call it, to add another user to the network or to the platform. And if you see, the beauty of a marketplace is that costs increase linearly, whereas value and hence revenue increases exponentially. And hence it is very common for us to find marketplaces delivering disproportionate profits and considering that they spend cautiously on marketing and discounting. We find that these because of network effects, marketplaces tend to grow way faster than any other conventional business that we can think of, right? So that really is the sort of point that I wanted to put forward. And although this might seem very theoretical at this point, you will actually see as we proceed along in this webinar that this is actually very relevant and it actually works. And we can actually have a product roadmap that makes this network effect happen, not just happen, but also sustain it for a long period of time. Right, so let's now dig deep into really exploring what this network effect means for a two-sided marketplace. Right. So this graphic nicely explains what that is. So on one end you have a buyer and the other end you have a seller, and you see that there are largely two kinds of network effects that are at play. Number one here is, as more sellers come onto the platform, each seller sees more value, which typically we refer to as same side network effect. And as each buyer comes in the platform, the other buyers see more value in sticking to the platform, and that is what we necessarily call as the buyer side network effect, right? And then there are cross side network effects as well. Take for example an Amazon or a booking.com. You essentially go there because you know you're going to find choice there, and you'll most likely be able to buy the product or book a hotel of your choice. And as a user, you do that because you know that these platforms tend to have a wide variety of choice and a large participation from the seller group, right? And at the same time, sellers join the same platforms because they know that there are a lot of buyers on this platform who are looking to avail their services and buy their products. That essentially is what is known as cross-site network effects. Now, to put this into perspective, we some time back spoke about networks and marketplaces, and the same side network effect largely comes for social media networks and messaging apps rather than conventional transactional marketplaces. Transactional marketplaces tend to see a lot of cross-site network effect, a lot more visible and causal as compared to the same side network effects. So that's that, and I hope that that sort of clearly explained to you what kinds and flavors of network effects are possible. Now let's quickly put this, in a real life situation. Take all of this theory and put this in a real life situation and see how the network effect actually works, right? So let's take the example of, let's say, an Amazon, for example, or let's say Flipkart, right? So now a reason why a seller would join Flipkart is because they know that there are lots of buyers on Flipkart, and they may be able to liquidate their inventory far faster on this platform rather than joining any other smaller marketplace. So they come in and they offer selection, and that selection directly feeds into great customer experience, and these customers can find what they need in the fastest possible way, and that great customer experience then generates a lot of traffic, which then generates a lot of sellers, which then generates a lot of selection, and then customer experience and traffic, and so on, right? So this is a virtuous circle, and in all of this, what Flipkart is able to do, or what an Amazon or what a booking.com or a Make My Trip is able to do, is use this virtuous cycle in order to lower its cost structures, provide amortize its fixed costs over a much larger base, lower the prices, provide more value, get more customer experience, and really this is how it is able to achieve non-linear growth, long-term profitability, and building moats, right? So in today's day, in today's competitive environment, anybody can build a great app with a great interface, with fantastic usability, etc. But if they don't have network effects, they can very easily be copied by a competitor and destroyed, in a matter of months. And that is really where network effects help. Once you get the network effects going on your marketplace, for a competitor to come and disrupt your business becomes very, very difficult. And as time progresses, it becomes increasingly difficult for anybody to come and do that. And that is really why you must be able to look at network effects from a product management and from a business lens. So that when you do a roadmap, you're actually able to tie a roadmap to first achieve network effects and then sustain network effects, and then look at really scaling your marketplace. So I hope that point really came across clear. Now, network effects may seem like a very awesome thing and that all of us should get, but in reality they are very, very difficult to achieve, and sometimes also end up having negative sides to it, right? So for example, you may see that if a radio or a TV offers too many ads, then the viewers and the watchers tend to get irritated and tend to not watch that channel, right? So that is a classic example of a negative network effect. And another negative network effect could happen in real life scenario if you are offering a poor service and you're not able to do a good job of ensuring liquidity and connecting buyers and suppliers. At the end, if your users don't feel confident and they're not ready to promote you, they will badmouth the brand, and that also sometimes results in negative network effects. And the classic way to measure whether you are headed down that path is to look at a metric called net promoter scores. I hope that you heard of that. So if really your NPS is negative, you should really be very, very cautious in growing that marketplace, because the more you grow, the more bad mouthing and the more negative publicity you get, right? So that's a very dangerous that's a very dangerous path to tread. And as a product manager, you must do anything you can to ensure that you stay on the positive side of the NPS scale. Right. So sometime back we saw that buyers and sellers meet on a platform. Now, when you look at it from the lens of acquisition, conversion, retention, and referral, there are really two product focus areas or two growth focus areas, and you must acquire and convert and retain both buyers and sellers. It is not just about buyers and it's not just about users. You must ensure that sellers also find equal value in sticking to your platform, without which they may leave the platform. And if one side leaves the platform, we all by now know that the value for the other side significantly reduces, right? So as a product manager, it is crucial for you to understand how to acquire, convert, and retain both buyers and sellers. And oftentimes we see that even in medium-sized startups, you actually have different product teams focusing on seller acquisition, ensuring liquidity, seller retention, seller business intelligence. There are so many sub-focus areas within this area of focus. And then there is a B2C or a B2C product management team that essentially focuses on what customers have we acquired, how have we converted them, and how do we plan to retain them, right? So that is very important for you to understand, that it's not marketplace product management is not about one side. It is about ensuring that the way the platform is built gives value to both sides, right? And eventually, as this value comes, you will start to see referrals happening or word of mouth happening on both sides, and that is really what accelerates growth. All right, so so far I think we have a very basic understanding of what a network effect is. Now I want to touch upon what a network effect is not, right? So there are so many terminologies floating around: growth hacking and virality and exponential growth and also network effect, right? And there's also this term called economies of scale, right? So I actually wanted to spend some time talking about what a network effect is and what it is not, and how it is different from a virality or economies of scale, right? Very clearly, one point that I want to bring forward is that network effect does not always mean virality. Virality is very different and has very different objectives compared to the objective that a network effect fulfills, right? So inherently, a network effect generates value, which is what we've seen in the previous slides. We saw that as more users, more buyers, more sellers join the platform, they see more value, right? But virality, on the other end, is all about the speed of acquisition or the speed with which the buyers and sellers come to the platform. So on the right hand side, virality, think speed. On the left hand side, network effect, think value, right? So while you may have very, very crazily viral products, you may actually not see network effects in them, and the vice versa is also true, where you may have great network effects in a marketplace, but perhaps they will never go viral, not because they don't want to, but because it's not necessary and causal to a network effect. So I hope that is clear, and let's take a few examples to really validate this hypothesis of why a network effect does not mean virality, right? So let's take the example of Airbnb here. Now, Airbnb, we all know, connects homeowners with people who want to book rooms for their business travel or for their leisure travel, right? Now, Airbnb is a classic example of a two-sided marketplace that has network effects, right? So as there are more options of room nights available, more buyers would be attracted to it, and the same is true for the homeowners as well. But essentially, Airbnb has never gone viral. Like, I have never heard of anybody say that Airbnb is viral, right? Of course, it has seen growth. It has seen massive valuations. It has achieved a lot of revenue, but it never really went viral in the true sense of it. A YouTube video could go viral, but Airbnb could never go viral, right? So this is a classic example of how network effects can happen without virality, right? So at the heart of all of this, we must understand that two things really lead to network effects, right? First is that Airbnb was able to attract enough homeowners and people looking to book room nights at a certain pace, and at the same time, it was able to retain these guys on their platform. So really, when acquisition and retention work together, is really when you see network effects and multiplicative effects and flywheel effects, and for all the adjectives you can give to it, that is really when it kicks off, right? The same is true with Facebook. In the early days, Facebook was able to acquire users at a rapid pace, but not only acquire them, but also engage with them and keep them engaged on their platform at the same rate, right? So at one stage, when it was acquiring only a few thousand users a day, its engagement rate was upwards of 50-60% engagement rates as we define as daily active users. But even when it was acquiring millions of users a day, its engagement rates were still upwards of 50%. So that is really the key of how a network effect plays in, right? So that's what I wanted to put forth when I said network effects don't necessarily mean virality. Let's now take the example of Angry Birds. We all have played this game at least once, I believe. This is a classic example of complete virality without network effects, right? So the within a very short span of time, this app got a lot of downloads, and everyone was playing this game, and it was going bonkers, right? It was all over the place, and that really means virality. So the speed with which people adopted and played and downloaded the app really is virality. But again, Angry Birds never really had network effects, in the sense that if the fact that millions of other players are playing Angry Birds does not make the game more interesting for me, and that is precisely why it does not have network effects, right? So I hope that that part of it is clear. Now, even with Amazon, Amazon has seen massive supply side economies of scale. What that means is that because it is able to deliver a lot of orders in a certain area, it is able to optimize its delivery costs, its fulfillment costs, its logistics costs, and pass on that benefit back to the user in terms of reduced prices, in terms of lower margins, in terms of discounts, etc. And that really leads to reduction in cost structures, but not necessarily a network effect, right? Simply because more users are using Amazon does not mean, or simply because there are cost reductions does not mean that I see more value as more users use Amazon. So I hope that that part is also clear, right? So this is really what a network effect is, and at this point, I want to pause here and ask Ankita if there are a few questions around the fundamentals of this before we move into how to align product roadmap to achieve network effects.
Yeah, hi Venkatesh. We have few of them revolving around the slides which we've just discussed. One is by Amit, who is asking, so this cost is for customer or marketplace? This is from the slide where the cost increases linearly, but value shoots up exponentially. I think from that point in time, he has asked this question.
Sorry, I didn't get the cost part of it. Should I go
Uh,
back to slide are we referring to?
he's asking, Amit is saying, so this cost is for customer or marketplace? Now you can go to the slide and can relate the question.
Okay, I didn't get the cost part of it. I think this slide is being
Yeah,
referred to.
this is the slide, and he
Yes.
has just written that. So this cost is for customer or marketplace.
No, this is the cost for the marketplace. So let me give you an example here, right? Let's assume that you have built a marketplace application and you have a marketplace platform. And today, let's say you have 20 users on your platform, 20 buyers on your platform, and 20, let's say, sellers on your platform. Now, in order to maintain that platform, you incur a fixed cost. Now, those fixed costs could come in terms of, let's say, let's say you employ 3 engineers to maintain that mobile app, right? That's a fixed cost. Let's say you buy some server space from AWS, right? That's a fixed cost. Let's say you have a building for which you have to an office rent. That's a fixed cost, right? So that is the cost to a marketplace. And every time you add a new user, there is an incremental cost that you incur. Let's assume for a moment that you have a call center as well, which currently has just 5 people with 20 users, right? Now, suddenly, if you were to have 100 users on your platform, the 5 people call center may not be sufficient, and maybe you will think of having a 10-member call center, right? So those are what is the incremental cost here. So really, F plus C is the cost to a marketplace and not the user. In some cases where these costs are prohibitive, and when a marketplace is not able to make revenue, some of these costs are passed to the user as well, and which is where the concept of money side and subsidy side come in. And I'll touch upon it as we go through the building blocks of marketplace. So I hope that I've answered that question.
Yeah, thanks, Venkatesh. There's the second question, after which I think you can resume the presentation. So
Yeah.
Kiran is asking you that what type of model does OYO follow?
That's a very good question. Oyo essentially started off as a marketplace at its heart, but in a slightly different flavor. It started off as a curated marketplace, right? So what a curated marketplace essentially means is that there is a certain set of criteria that a seller has to meet in order to be a part of Oyo's marketplace, right? So Oyo essentially started off by saying that, okay, I'm going to standardize the accommodation experience by providing A, B, C, D, by providing early check-ins and whatnot, right? So it is essentially a curated marketplace is how Oyo started off. And at that point in time was directly competing with the likes of Make My Trip, Booking.com, GoIBibo, and Come What May, right? So that is how it started off. But in the recent past, they have moved out of this marketplace model, and their focus now continues to become a full hospitality player, where they are actually moving into the supplier space of things. So I hope that distinction to you is clear. So now they're essentially half competition and half supply for the likes of a pure online hotel booking website such as a Make My Trip.
Okay, Venkatesh, one more I think we can take up and then you can start the presentation again, which
Yeah.
is LinkedIn a pure network or a marketplace?
That's again a great question. Like I said before, social networks who start off purely as a network eventually tend to become marketplaces. And Facebook is the classic example of that. It started off purely as a social network. But today we see elements of a marketplace inside Facebook. To give you an example, today you can actually buy products on Facebook in terms of its marketplace offering, where you can just open your app and see who's a seller who wants to sell, who's nearby you and who wants to sell something, right? Similarly, the other marketplace element to Facebook is the whole ads piece, right? So now it is become a marketplace for advertisers and between users wherein a brand or an advertiser wants to bid and communicate and put an ad on Facebook. That essentially has a marketplace element for it. But if you ask me at its heart, I would think Facebook as a network more than it is a marketplace. So the distinction is not really clear. Similarly, LinkedIn started off as a pure professional networking site, but today you see that it has talent solutions for HR executives to really reach out to talent and do some sort of advertising and segmentation there. So it also tends to have marketplace elements in it. And most social networks tend to do that because they eventually have to monetize their business, and without marketplace elements in it, it's really difficult to monetize.
All right. Thank you, Venkatesh. I think we should resume our presentation.
Cool. So, so I think continuing from this presentation, right? So the cost, right? I think we touched upon one question there that said, is this cost is for marketplace or for the user? That's a very good question, and that brings us to the chicken and egg problem here, which most marketplace in its nascent stages face, right? So how do you even kickstart a marketplace, in the sense that do you first reach out to the supplier and ask them to come to your marketplace and be present on your marketplace when there's actually no demand? Or do you reach out to users and somehow expect them to stick to your marketplace without many sellers on them? And this is the problem that in fact, all marketplaces face. And the real way to solve this, or the real framework to solve this, is twofold. The first is that we need to identify the money side and subsidy side, right? So the money side is the side of the marketplace that gives money, and the subsidy side is usually the side that is slightly difficult to get onto the platform, right? So usually what we see in conventional marketplaces is that the customer or the user is the subsidy side, which is why we see all of these marketplaces doing a lot of discounting and trying to change the user behavior and get them to come to their platform, where the choice may not be great. But when as choice picks up, the discounts tend to go down and the subsidies tend to go down, right? So the number one way to solve the chicken and egg problem is to subsidize the side that is more difficult to get onto the platform, right? But and the money side is essentially the side that is easier to get onto the platform compared to the other side. So to give you an example here, let's take the example of, let's say, a restaurant, right? Now the restaurant really doesn't have to lose anything by being a part of Swiggy's network or Swiggy's marketplace, right? So they don't have to do anything. In fact, Swiggy gives them a tablet and says, okay, here's when an order comes, all you have to do is uh, you know keep this ready for the delivery executive to come and pick it up. So really there, the restaurant doesn't have to lose anything by being a part of Swiggy's network. And hence I think for them, the money side is the supplier and the subsidy side is the user, right? So that is essentially how you solve the chicken and egg problem. But this chicken and egg problem is not global. It has to be solved again and again and again and again as the marketplace expands. To give you an example of redBus, when we started off the Malaysia business, we had the same problem, but we somehow managed to get the suppliers on our platform and retain them in some way. But we had to be very, very cautious in acquiring users. For example, we were only able to get users on a certain sector of bus travel, and we made sure that we get deep supply going there and get the network effects growing at a micro level. Now, when we expand to other parts of Malaysia or other parts of a country, we have to do the same thing over and over and over again. The great thing about repeating it over and over and over again is that it may become very difficult at the first 2-3 tries, but after that you have enough traction in your platform to fuel the solution of this chicken and egg problem much faster as you grow, right? So really two things to solve the chicken and egg problem. Number one, clearly identify the money side and subsidy side. I would advise that go behind supply first, because that usually tends to be easier to get onto the platform. And secondly, start with a niche, right? Start with a very small segment, acquire, convert, retain, and then repeat, and then widen your segment, and then acquire, convert, and repeat. And that's really how you can scale your marketplace, right? So to give you an example of the old conventional model, whoever has supplied that big hall with tube lights probably sold it in one part of the city where there are sellers and buyers, but has not solved it in some other city altogether. So he has to do the same cycle again in other cities. And this becomes a very complicated problem, especially for on-demand marketplaces like Swiggy and Uber and Ola, where even within the city, there can be huge gaps between supply and demand. I think we don't have much time left, so let me quickly go through the building blocks of a marketplace. And I cannot stress enough that unless all these 5 building blocks are taken care of, it does not make sense for a product manager to start thinking about building complicated features and having machine learning algorithms and doing a lot of fancy product features around it, right? So the building blocks of a marketplace, choice and inventory, and product managers must figure out a way to ensure liquidity both for buyers and sellers, right? And one way of doing that, or ensuring liquidity, essentially means that you have to really know who you're acquiring and will you be able to retain that person. Another advice is to create seller software and tools to make them stick to your platform. The other is really search and discovery, and this widely varies from marketplace to marketplace. A product manager must really figure out how to aid the process of selection and elimination, and this is where things get really diverse, right? So some apps offer a very search driven experience, whereas some apps offer a very exploration driven experience, and it truly depends upon the kind of category you are in and the kind of user you're trying to persuade and induce trial into. Secure payments, of course, is very obvious, because easy payments is a huge value add as far as online marketplaces are concerned, and most of the friction around payments must be removed. Otherwise, it is really difficult for traction to pick into a marketplace, right? And for some of the marketplaces who are in the business of delivering physical goods, fulfillment and returns and a very predictable nature and way is essential to building a marketplace. And needless to say, trust and safety, right? Because here the user is actually buying a product or a service without actually experiencing it much. So there has to be a lot of trust and safety built, and a few of the points on the right hand side actually tell how to do that. For example, we have launched guarantee programs across almost all of our markets, big or small, with the single objective of inducing trust with our users. Now, quickly jumping, we'll just take about 5 minutes to talk about these 3 stages of marketplace growth. Most startups will tend to fall in bucket 1, where they have to have relentless focus on fundamentals. Medium-sized marketplaces who have gone beyond fundamentals will want to sort of accelerate their acquisition and retention, really get the flywheel effect going. And bigger marketplaces, the likes of Amazon, Flipkart, Uber, redBus, Swiggy, will really focus on establishing data network effects, and we'll talk about data network effects in a while. But as far as startups are concerned, my advice to product managers would be, don't think fancy, stick to the fundamentals, and make sure that these 4 areas in your product are completely taken care of before you look at investing your engineering effort or even investing your mind share into something else, right? So your key job, your role, your existence must depend upon finding your niche and ensuring liquidity. At the same time, getting payments and fulfillment right, and doing as much as you can to establish user trust. Without any of these things, you cannot expect traction in your marketplace. Most of the medium-sized marketplaces that go beyond fundamentals are stuck in a very long span where they are in phase 2 before they move into phase 3, right? And sometimes this span can go from a few years to even decades, right? So as you grow beyond fundamentals, you have to think beyond your niche, which is where you have to find other segments, acquire, convert, retain, and that whole cycle has to be really accelerated here when you have to think beyond your niche. To give you an example, Uber started with Uber Black, which is just one type of service, but today you see at least 4 or 5 of those services, right? So here really Uber has gone beyond its niche and looked at so many other and looked at a much larger target audience, right? And the key focus also should be for retention, because unless you have retention in your platform, you cannot establish flywheel effect. The two metrics that are of paramount importance is for you to add new users every day to your platform and retain them at the very least at the same level. Your retention should not go down as you add more users. and whatever needs to be done in the product, in the form of referral programs, loyalty programs, re-engagement features, personalization, start thinking along those lines and make sure that you're able to make a returning user's life far easier than what that same user had experienced when he or she first experienced the platform. And again, in order to really scale and fuel some of your new business lines, etc., you need to focus on unit economics, right? This is where product managers can start thinking about a laundry list of features to improve conversion rates, to do a lot of small adjustments and tweaks and optimizations in the platform to ensure that the conversion rates are optimized, and also have relentless focus on variable cost optimization. A marketplace in stage 2 needs to push really hard in order to become unit positive. Unit positive basically means that the revenue you make per transaction must be higher than the unit costs you incur in facilitating that transaction. And if you don't do that, you'll really never be able to move to stage 3 unless you are magically able to find an investor who is willing to pump in loads of money into your platform. At this stage, you will also want to automate as much as possible, because really when you start off in stage 1, you don't have engineering teams, you don't have a lot of support, and you want to do quick experiments and you are okay doing manual things. But as you move into stage 2, you have to start thinking automation, because manual processes will eventually become the nemesis and hinder the growth of a platform, because here you're dealing with growth and acquisition, both seller and buyer, at a rate where manual processes will tend to become bottlenecks. Right? And this is really another place where you have to start thinking about feedback loops, right? So you have feedback from one side of the platform, how do you pass it on to the other side of the platform, right? Which is where things like seller tools come in, which is really what a feedback loop is. And this feedback loop really plays a crucial role in establishing data network effects. Data network effects, put simply, is how do you use data to make sure that as more users come to your platform, each user finds more value, right? That is really the same side network effect or data network effect that we should be looking at. And large marketplaces usually tend to have a very different focus areas, very different product team structures, in order to achieve its own objectives, because now it has moved much beyond fundamentals and beyond acceleration. So at this stage, you should start thinking about new lines of business, adding complementary products, getting additional revenue through premium programs, memberships, because at such a scale, the value is so high that a user will be most willing to pay a premium to get some additional and unlock more value out of your platform. Some marketplaces go to the path of ad monetization. That's also the sort of thing that a really big third stage marketplace, so to speak, should be doing. And really what will drive these marketplaces forward is relentless focus on seller growth, right? So from being a facilitator, you are now becoming a market maker, right? You start to create categories. So to give you an example, to give you an in-house redBus example, we started embarking upon dynamic pricing, where we really want to help our bus operators and sellers optimize their revenue and hence optimize our revenue, right? So that really is something these high-level marketplaces should be thinking. There are certain advanced concepts around on-demand marketplaces in the form of demand shaping, right? Because take the example of Swiggy, for example. Now, how does a Swiggy ensure that its scale, a certain set of orders, a certain minimum set of orders go to a certain restaurant, right? Because the restaurant is ready to pay for an ad slot. So that is the sort of ideas that must come, that must be driven at such scale of business. And in the end, there is a whole practice called marketplace health, and many companies actually have this as a separate product unit that purely focuses on health. So stuff around fraud prevention, stuff around risk mitigation, predictions, operations loss management, all of these things come under marketplace health area of focus. So I hope that that sort of gives you a sense of how a marketplace moved from a startup stage to a mid-sized marketplace to a really big marketplace. So I want to end this discussion with this statement by Max. He's a popular marketplace evangelist. has really led big marketplaces, and he says that success and defensibility of a marketplace really lies in its ability to not only build but also sustain product and data network effects. So that's really what a marketplace product manager should be thinking about day in day out. So I hope that that you guys found this session useful. I think we have just about 5 minutes left, so let's open the floor for Q&A.
Yes, Venkatesh, let's just begin the Q&A. The first question is by Barkha. She's asking, there was one slide in which you were talking about cost and values, where value was
Yeah,
increasing exponentially. How
yeah.
exactly do we measure the value? Plus, and it seems it is not the exponential growth, but quadratic.
Uh, okay, I didn't get quite get the second part of the question, but you're asking how exactly do you measure the value? Um, I think value has to be measured in purely in terms of retention, right? Any metric that you the fundamentals of value lie in how good your retention is, right? If the user feels value or finds value, they will come back, and if they don't come back, they don't find value, and then we try to create value through other means such as subsidies and discounts and cashbacks and so on, right? The only way to measure value in a very systematic way is to measure retention, and different companies have different ways of measuring retention. It's really difficult to put a standard formula to it, but if you're able to measure retention in your marketplace, you are essentially measuring value. The second part of the question is something that I did not get. Can you repeat that?
Venkatesh, the second part is, and it seems it is not the exponential growth but quadratic.
Yeah, sure. I mean, you can put a proper maths definition to it. By what I exponential, I mean non-linear. So let me correct myself there. Yeah. Let's say non-linear growth.
All right. The next question is by Prem Kishore. He's asking, how would a B2B services marketplace for equipment assets work, and how to proliferate for exponential growth? Services such as AMCs, equipment calibration, ad hoc repairs of equipment, etc.
The fundamentals are the same, right? Whether it's a B2B marketplace or a B2C marketplace, you do have two sides who are one side looking for a service and the other side looking to offer a service. So whatever I spoke about in this presentation, all of it is relevant to you. Where things may become slightly different is the acquisition aspect of it, right? So there are very different ways of acquiring a B2C customer or acquisition in a B2C marketplace compared to a B2B marketplace. Typically, what I've seen B2B marketplaces do is go very offline, do a lot of content marketing to get acquisition going. So acquisition aside, I think the rest of the elements of the marketplace are exactly the same.
All right. Tejaswita
Basically,
has a
as a
question.
yeah, go ahead.
I'm so sorry. You want to continue or say something?
No, I just
Venki,
wanted to
please
end
go
that
ahead.
point. Yeah, I just want to end that point by saying if you think that you are a marketplace that is great at offering a certain B2B service, then go hard on content marketing, because that is a natural pull for a B2B customer to get attracted to your platform.
All right, let's move to the other question by Tejaswita. She's asking, what all parameters to be considered while localizing a marketplace product for different geographical locations?
That's a great question. Look, the when I touched upon the building blocks of a marketplace, right? We briefly talked about the process of search and discovery and payments, right? So, in my experience, having seen the same marketplace scale across 6 geographies, I feel that these are the 2-3 things that really tend to vary from one geography to the other in terms of localization, right? So your search and discovery experience in one market could be very different from what you've seen in another market. Similarly, when you look at payments, for example, it's completely different from one market to the other. And by extension, for people in physical goods marketplace, the delivery and fulfillment could also be vastly different. But other than these, I don't see that the other areas will need a lot of localization.
All right. The other question is, what is the difference between a marketplace and an aggregator?
They tend to be used as they tend to be used interchangeably. We use aggregators, OTAs. For example, online travel aggregator is a very common term. It is essentially a marketplace. An aggregator is somebody who aggregates services from different sellers with the ultimate objective of selling it to somebody, which is a buyer. So they are a marketplace.
All right, so let's have this as a last question. There are more, but we are a little bit time bound. So the
Yeah.
last question for this session is: would it be all right to charge subscribers to enroll into a marketplace before the transaction engine is in place?
Of course not. I mean, if you can't facilitate a transaction, then nobody will come and pay any fees to you. So I hope that I've understood that question correctly. If you can't facilitate a transaction, there is no way you can charge a fees to a customer.
All right, I guess there are a few more questions, so I request all of you, the audience, who would want to ask more questions, they can connect with Venkatesh through LinkedIn. Will that be fine, Venkatesh?
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, and the LinkedIn credential, everything is mentioned when you have registered for the session. Plus, thank you so much, Venki, for this awesome presentation. The way you explained the concepts with the help of examples, infographics, it was tremendous. I'm sure, just like everyone, I'm sure they would have enjoyed and learned something new. Plus, a small information to all of you that we are beginning a GTM series. The first episode is on 16th of April. For more details, please visit nascom.in/events. And thank you everyone for your time. And thank you, Venki, for your time as well as your efforts. It was really great to listen to you.
Thanks all. Thanks, Ankita. I hope you guys have some actionable insights from this discussion.
Absolutely. Thank you. Take care. See you soon, all of you.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.